You know them, you love them. The Pawn Stars have been entertaining us for years, but they're also running a cutthroat business in which things don't always go as planned. Here are 10 Pawn Stars deals that, for one reason or another, went completely wrong. Vietnamese dagger in the heart. An unassuming young man walks into the pawn shop hoping to sell a knife he was holding in his collection. He quietly explains what he knows to Rick before the shrewd, and in this case insensitive, shop owner begins to pick apart this young man's dream of making any cash today piece by piece. He starts by claiming that this knife is not as old as the owner believes due to the plating of the metal below the blade and the fact that the leather does not look or smell in any way old or rotten. Rick goes on to point out that the thread is modern, the gems are plastic, and then he tops it off by saying that the dagger's not even from Vietnam. At this point, he should have shaken the kid's hand and sent him on his way, but just to rub salt in the wound, Rick asks how much the owner wants to get out of it. When he replies $250, Rick goes for the jugular and tells him he will give him nothing. Ouch!
It's not really worth what I was trying to get for it.
Flintlock pistol whip. The owner of an 18th century flintlock pistol strolls into the pawn shop one day and encounters Big Hoss behind the counter. The seller tells Corey that this is the most prized piece in his collection, but that his wife, who wasn't happy with him for dropping so much money on a gun, is making him get rid of it.
Well, man, some people would choose to get rid of the wife.
The seller does not have any authentication paperwork, and Corey does not like to be fooled. So he, of course, calls in an expert to evaluate the pistol. The expert immediately shatters this man's dreams by telling him it is 100% fake. He leaves the shop in rage, not looking forward to dinner with his wife this evening. Chumley faked out by a mandolin. Whether this owner knows it or not, he hit the jackpot when he meets Chumley at the desk as he's hawking a fake Gibson mandolin.
Thank you.
Chumley immediately begins painfully rocking out on the imposter instrument, at which point the seller can smell victory. Chumley calls for backup, but is met with silence. So now we know this is not going to end well. As he examines the instrument, it becomes clear that he has absolutely no idea what he's talking about. So Chumley pays $1,500 for it before learning from a cringing expert that it is obviously a fake.
This is fake as hell, man.
Madonna's planner. A fedora-wearing gentleman claiming to have a journal kept by Madonna herself attempts to land a big payment from the pawn shop. He asks for $25,000, which moves Corey to call an expert to check the handwriting for validity. The expert confirms that the piece is real, but it estimates a $10,000 to $12,000 worth, less than half of what the seller's asking for. So naturally, this gentleman passive-aggressively disagrees with the expert, making for an awkward few moments. No deal was made, but Mr. Fedora doesn't make his exit without delivering the parting blow that we all make mistakes.
Listen, we all make mistakes in life.
Madonna's day planner isn't going to be one of mine, I promise.
Well, we'll see what happens. I appreciate your help.
Take care, man.
Thanks, man.
An old man and a cannon. Who would expect a cannon to show up in the parking lot? Only the Pawn Stars are unfazed by a turn of events like this. Rick's expert can easily confirm that it is real due to the fact that the ATF prohibits any reproduction of this weapon. I think that's one regulation we can all agree on. After pointing out a few more interesting factoids, the expert estimates the worth of this machinery at $40,000. Now, the seller is an easygoing older gentleman who makes a grave negotiation error by reacting to the appraisal with the fact that he was only looking to get $30,000 out of it. Rick doesn't cut the guy any slack, but instead tells him that if the cannon shoots, then $30,000 it is. When was the last time you saw Rick take a seller's first offer? He knew he was ripping an old guy off, but all he could see was the green. Rick gets beat. A way too smiley young man walks up to the counter as Rick and Big Hoss are talking serious business. They don't seem too intent on giving him the time of day until he drops the bombshell that he's carrying a 1776 annual register. The 30-year-old kid doesn't really understand what piece of history he's holding, evidenced by his lack of having ever heard of the Articles of Confederation.
The Articles of the Confederation.
Well, what's all that about?
How old are you?
I'm 30.
He wants to make $2,000 to take his girl out on the town, but Rick isn't so sure. Rick's old books expert examines the piece and determines the worth to be right around $3,000, which the seller claims he would pay for a first edition Nintendo Power, whatever the hell that is. So they negotiate down to $1,600. The kid walks out grinning from ear to ear, and Rick is left shaking his head in disbelief that he had been had. Longfellow. A photo and letter of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow showed up at the counter. Rick is obviously into this item, and the seller is pretty ambivalent toward it, just looking to get out of the house and make a couple bucks. So the seller offers to let it go for $300. Rick should have taken the deal, but instead he calls in his buddy to take a look. After confirming the item's authenticity, the expert tags the price at $1,500. Rick shakes his head as the owner smiles, so they settle on $700, more than double the original asking price. Rick's katana. Rick loves his Japanese katana, probably more than he loves his own son. Definitely more than he loves Chumlee. This item sits in the shop, but the crew has strict instructions not to sell. What Corey and Chumlee didn't see coming was Dana White of the UFC walking into the shop looking for a sword. Chumlee decides to offer him the sword and negotiates his way into a $60,000 deal, including many other swords. Rick isn't terribly happy about the deal until he comes into the storeroom to see Dana White, thrilled by the purchase of his new katana. Napoleon's letter. Corey has a customer claiming to have a letter signed by Napoleon Bonaparte. As is well known, Napoleon was quite short. So is the owner of this item. After the seller makes a joke that his wife tells him he has a Napoleon complex, Corey joins in and insults the man's lack of height. He does not find it funny and no longer feels back about selling Big Hoss a fake letter. Corey offers his $2,000 and the seller accepts his first offer immediately, which should have been a huge red flag. Corey then takes it to an expert who pegs the item as a mere replica. The old man and Rick are furious.
Corey, why don't you take it home and remind yourself not to be so damn stupid?
Rick loses big on stolen diamonds. But Rick isn't always perfect himself. He once paid $40,000 for a pair of earrings that seemed to be on the up and up.
Ask him all the questions, he even had a receipt.
But it turns out it was all stolen, right down to the receipt. So the police reclaimed the jewelry and the Pawn Stars were out of luck.
That was the biggest bust I ever had in the pawn shop.
So that's it. What are some of your favorite deals gone bad? Leave a comment and let us know. And remember to subscribe to the channel for more wheelin' dealin' content like you've seen today.